So my name is Richard Cutler. I'm from MasterCard. I'm Director of Emerging Verticals, which means I'm leading MasterCard's entry into new markets that we have fairly limited acceptance in today. So in particular, we're here to talk about rent. We're also going to talk about electronic payments and their effect that they can have on collecting payments from tenants. So I wanted to start off just tell you a little bit about MasterCard because I think we're well known, but I think that we're largely misunderstood. So contrary to popular belief, we don't actually issue credit cards. All right, that's the banks that are responsible for issuing credit cards. What MasterCard does is it facilitates secure electronic transactions between cardholders, merchants, and issuers. Okay, we do that in 210 countries and 150 currencies worldwide. So another common misconception about MasterCard is that we're out there lending consumer credit. These are people who couldn't afford something, and so they're putting it on their MasterCard to pay for it. That's also not the case. So cardholders see MasterCard as a convenient, fast payment method. Okay, and what we've seen here is over the past 10 years, people have increased their average monthly spend on their credit card by 72%. Okay, so looking for more and more ways to put purchases, everyday purchases, on their credit cards. In that same time, we've seen a 42% reduction in the cardholders carrying a balance month to month. So that means that these people, they're spending more and they pay it off at the end of every month. We've also asked consumers, because we're emerging into these new sectors, we've asked them, do you want to pay for these purchases on your MasterCard? Okay, do you have an interest in this? So these are our 2014 numbers. We surveyed them. So rent, there in the middle, 28% of all renters, if given their choice of payment methods, check, EFT, pre-authorized deposit, post-dated check, whatever it is, 28% would select to pay with their credit card as their primary method. Okay. In the column to the right, we've looked at premium card holders separately. Okay, they tend to be more active in looking for rewards because they're getting more rewards. So that number jumps to 37%. Okay, we also find that 55% of all card holders are looking for ways that they can move expenditures that are currently cash or check based onto that credit card. So they're actively looking for ways to do this. So we looked at the rental market. Okay, $24 billion a year in rent payments for the latest statistics that we had. Currently, only 3% are on card. Okay, now the bottom piece of pie there, the yellow and the red, those are electronic payments. Pre-authorized deposit, their EFT, which could be an e-transfer of some sort, and credit card. But what we see, and it was kind of surprising to us, is that the majority of these payments are still manual. They're checking cash. Now, I'm sure that the cash is largely focused on a very small market. It's probably the individual landlords if they're accepting cash. But we think that there's a big market there that could benefit from moving from a manual payment system again to an electronic one. Okay. One of the facts that came up during our research was that a lot of property managers spend up to a day reconciling those payments before they even go to deposit those checks. So they've already lost a day of having that money in their account. So MasterCard, we hired a third party. Okay, they're called Kaiser & Associates. They're a consulting firm. Okay, because we wanted an independent analysis of this market to see if there was a place for us to even fit into it. Okay, so they came back with this methodology. They split the market into 3 segments. Small landlords that I just mentioned. Okay, those were fewer than 10 units, very small. We looked at rent-controlled properties, which were 100 to 400 tenants and had a very limited ability to increase the rents. Okay, that makes them very price sensitive on the payment method that they accept. And then the last being free market properties. You got anywhere from 80 to 8,000 tenants. They have a little bit more flexibility over the cost for rent. Okay, so what we asked this consulting firm Kaiser to come back with was an inside perspective on merchants, their costs, their pain points, the reasons that they accepted or didn't accept various forms of payment. Okay. And what we found and what we're going to show is that the perceived cost, what you think it may cost to accept a specific payment method, and what it actually costs can vary greatly. So the first thing that we asked, we interviewed, or Kaiser interviewed all of these landlords. Okay, they conducted these hour-long interviews with each of them, and they said, okay, if you're accepting card today, why are you accepting card? What we found out was increased automation was a big reason. Fast proof of payment. The card, you immediately know whether it's gone through, whether it's sufficient funds or not. And consumer demand. We know consumers like their cards. We just showed that. They want their points. The reasons for not accepting card was infrastructure. Okay, so is there some sort of accounting process? Is there some sort of payment portal? Is there something that's enabling it? Because largely, we're not talking about an apartment going and putting a credit card machine on the desk. Okay, we understand that that's not a feasible solution. And then I don't think this should come as any surprise to anybody. Fees. That was the biggest reason why they didn't want to accept credit card payments. They viewed the fees as too costly. So the one thing that's within our control, the fees, that's what we adjusted, okay? So these are our MasterCard's interchange rates. This is what it costs to process a MasterCard, all right? We were largely looking at the bottom two, standard interchange rate. That's for a one-off transaction, okay? You process one Visa card or MasterCard, it's gonna cost you 1.72%, all right? If you were set up to a recurring billing, it's happening every month, it's kind of a pre-authorized credit card transaction, you're looking at 1.59%. Now, on January 19th, we came out with these new lower interchange rates, all right? We reduced that core rate to 1%. So it's a fairly significant reduction, okay? And we think that at this price point, MasterCard and electronic transactions can offer value to the property managers. So I thought this was fantastic. Okay, MasterCard brings me in, to tell me we've lowered our rate to 1%. But we think we should talk to property managers. We think this is going to be this great thing. I was on board. What I immediately found out is that they should have lowered the interchange rate to 0, because that is basically what property managers were willing to pay for accepting card. Because they looked at the cost of check acceptance today, and they said to me, if I get a check for $1,000, I walk down to the bank, put it in the bank, I get $1,000 in my account. Therefore, the cost of accepting a check is 0. It costs me nothing. So why would I pay more to MasterCard to accept this payment if I'm already paying 0? How do you beat 0? Well, the cost of a check acceptance is not 0. Okay, and besides not valuing the time it takes to walk down to the bank and actually deposit it yourself, there's a number of other factors that they're missing in that analysis. They're missing the float cost, not having the money in your bank, the non-payment cost, so the ability for checks to bounce, insufficient funds, that sort of thing, and also the reconciliation cost. You have to take that manual payment, you have to apply it to an account and reconcile it. So the thing with those costs is they're not presented on a monthly statement. You don't get a statement that says it cost you this amount of money to reconcile your checks this month, as opposed to credit card transactions that come on a nice monthly statement and show you exactly what you paid. So there's not visibility into the costs associated with check, and it's difficult for property managers and building owners to measure that cost. And I think that's where MasterCard is coming in and what we're hoping to shed some light on today. So what Kaiser did is they interviewed these landlords, these property managers, okay? And they asked them a number of questions that would influence the cost of payment acceptance. The first one was around the float cost. What does it cost for not having the money you should have in your bank at any given time, all right? We found out that 8% of the payments in the rent-controlled and free market were late. That tenant didn't pay their money on time for whatever reason, okay? We found out that the average late payment is 17 days. That's how long it takes to track down that tenant and actually get the money from them, whether it's a new check or a new pre-authorized deposit or a new whatever it is. They also found that 2% of payments were marked as insufficient funds. Okay, so if a check goes to the bank, we know there's a cost for an NSF check coming back, whether it's passed along to the tenant in the end or not. There's a cost for that. Okay, what we found is electronic payment methods such as credit cards, pre-authorized deposits, they lowered the incidence of late payment by 70%. Okay. So what we did is we took a $1,000 payment. This is an independent research from Kaiser. Okay, they took a $1,000 payment and they quantified the cost of not having that money in the bank. So on the right-hand side here, we can see for every $1,000 check, the cost of that delay, whether it be the mail or a late payment, whatever it is, was 41 cents per $1,000. EFT, e-transfers, 28 cents, card 26, and pre-authorized deposit, the lowest, at 9 cents. Okay? Now, I mean, these are averages. Okay? That's an industry average. And even to say the industry average for a rent-controlled property, well, there's a lot of rent-controlled properties in Canada, and they all have a different set of circumstances, and we understand that. Okay? So while there are some who are likely much lower, there are also some who are much higher as well. So this value proposition differs based on the individual circumstances of the property manager. The next thing we looked at, improved tenant ability to pay. So we're looking at the people who maybe they didn't have the money on the 1st of the month, okay, but they might have it by the 5th of the month. All right. So we found that, and again, the red ones that's the small property manager, okay, that's 0 to 10. The gray ones are the rent-controlled. Yellow is free market, okay. So free market, every free market property had late payments. Every single one reported late payments, okay. 10% of these free market properties said that 5% of the payments were either incomplete or unpaid. So that tenant came and said, I owe $1,000. I've got $600 now. I'm going to give you $600. I'm going to give you the remaining $400 sometime later in the month, okay. And we also found that a large number of these property managers are using a collection service. When they can't get that money in, they're turning to a collection service to then go and get the tenants. Okay, the average cost of using a collection service was 30 cents on the dollar. Okay, suddenly my 1% fee looks a lot better. So we've got some quotes on the bottom. A small landlord, what he looks at is the cost of evicting one tenant, getting that person out, the missed revenue of not having a person in there while he finds a new tenant, okay? This particular landlord said that cost him about $12,000, If there's an ability for card to play a role here and fill that gap and enable that person to pay their rent so they don't have to be evicted, there's a huge cost savings to be had from that, okay? On the other end of the spectrum, property managers at free market, only 1% were incomplete or partial, but that amounted to $45,000 per year. It's a significant amount because of the scale of the business. So on the right-hand side, again, we validated the non-payment cost by card type, and this one actually card came out on top, $11.74 per $1,000 versus $12.59 for the other payment methods. And if you're thinking we're a little light on the detail here, we have a calculator that we're going to get into, which is going to show just how all those assumptions played into this. The last one we looked at is payment errors. Okay, so this can stem from a number of things. And pre-authorized deposit actually had the fewest number of errors. Okay, where card excelled is that it was the easiest to fix the errors. So if a card doesn't go through for any reason, it's easy to call that person and say, did the expiry date change? Is the card number wrong? Just read me the new information. We'll process this. Okay. Check, and I think this is unsurprising, had the largest number of errors. Okay, it could have been, it was maybe illegible. They missed the date. They wrote in the wrong amount. The person reconciling it misread it. There's so many things that can go wrong with a check that add to the complexity of reconciliation. The other thing is, these cards, PAD, EFT, they can be automated. Okay, they can be built into the accounts receivable system where check still requires a manual process at some level. So we add all that together. Okay, we take the float cost, the non-payment cost, the reconciliation fee. And what we find out is that card is the least expensive payment method to accept. Okay? You can see there, $14.61 per $1,000. Okay? It beats the next payment method by $3. With the addition of that transaction fee, it's the most expensive. But I think the key takeaway here is, $22.87 to accept a check. I think that comes as a big surprise to the person who told me it was $0 to accept that check. All right? And again, I understand that the set of circumstances can change from property manager to property manager, but at the end of the day, the cost for that check acceptance is not going to be zero. And there is going to be a value of using an electronic payment method to replace a manual payment method. So this deck is almost a teaser. It's a high-level overview of the data that we, or Kaiser, built for us, okay? And again, I touched on the fact that there's different sets of circumstances for different buildings here. So what we wanted to do is give an ability for people to punch in their own circumstances and get an individual cost of acceptance, okay? So that they can make informed decisions. You know, I'm not here to tell you that credit card is going to resolve all your issues and that's the be-all and end-all. It may not be, okay? But if you think that check is the most effective payment method, it's also likely not. And likely people fall in the middle of that scenario. So I will make this calculator available. Okay? If anybody wants to leave their business card with me, we're happy to email it out, and our hope is that people take it and play with it. You know, maybe 8% of late payments isn't right for your business. You know, but let's see what it is. You know, let's get a realistic view of your scenario and see where we stand. Now, this is just again a screenshot of the first page of our deck, but it gets into much greater detail. It's going to touch on all the different factors that I mentioned, and allow you to customize them based on your scenario.